In this video, I'm going to do page 214 in Krugman and Wells, Part A. And Part A asks us to look at the table that I've copied onto the screen and calculate 2013 consumer spending. If you notice from the table, we are looking at GDP in 2013. So if I can get this to work. So GDP in 2013. And we're talking about billions of US dollars. So 2013 consumer spending would be this number right here. And to calculate that, what we are going to do is simply add up the numbers that are not bolded underneath it, the subcomponents of consumer spending. So we have durable goods, which are goods that last for 3 or more years, non-durable goods, which are goods that last less than 3 years, and then services, something like maybe getting your oil changed. So these are the components of consumer spending that we need to add up. So what we're going to do is simply add 1,263.0 billion US dollars. We're going to add 2,622.9 billion US dollars and 7,615.7 billion US dollars. So I'm going to get my calculator out and add 1263 plus 2622.9 plus 7615.7, and what I get is 11,501.6. So 11,501.6 billion dollars is consumer spending in 2013. And in Part B, we are asked to calculate private investment spending. So this number right here. And we can see that the way that this accounting sheet works is that private investment spending is made up of subcomponents. And so these subcomponents sum together to add up to a component that's above and to the left of them. So for instance, private investment spending, we can say, is made up of fixed investment spending and the other component that's directly in a line with it, which is, oh, I'm sorry, this should be change in private inventories, so not residential. So the addition of fixed investment spending and change in private inventories should give you private investment spending. Now, fixed investment spending, we can see, is made up of subcomponents. So fixed investment spending can either be broken up into non-residential investment spending or residential fixed investment spending. And then similarly, we can look at non-residential fixed investment spending, which can be broken up into 2 subcategories, structures and equipment. And so depending on which numbers we want to use, we can, for instance, sum these two together to get non-residential fixed investment spending, and then we can add non-residential fixed investment spending to residential fixed investment spending, and then we can add change in private inventories to get our private investment spending. So it just depends on kind of how you want to add these numbers together, and obviously you want to do the least amount of work. So if we let's go back and just consider the original question, and I think the easiest way to do this problem is simply to add fixed investment spending and change in private inventories. So if we come over to the right here, what we're going to do is add $2,564.0 billion to $106.1 billion. And if I get my calculator out here, so we have 2,564 plus $106.1 billion, and we have 2,670.1. 2,670.1. So private investment spending, 2,670.1. Part C asks us to calculate 2013 net exports. Remember that anything net is just what is left over when you subtract something else. And in this case, so for instance, if I want to say what is my net gain in, say, if I'm a baker making a cake and selling it, what I would have to do is take the amount that I sold the cake for. So in class I did this example. Let's say I sold it for $20, and I would have to take away the amount that I put in to what I had to buy to make that cake. So let's say that I sold the cake for $20, but I spent $18 on the stuff that I needed to make the cake. So the eggs, the milk, the butter, whatever. My net gain from selling that cake, or my net profit, would be $20, what I sold the cake for, minus what I spent on the input, so $18. And so my net profit, net gain, is $2. Here, when we consider net exports, what we really want to consider is how much did we make by selling our stuff to the rest of the world. And what we want to take away is the amount we've spent on buying stuff from the rest of the world, our imports. So our net exports is going to be exports minus imports. And we're looking for this number right here that's going to tell us net exports. And so what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 2,259.9 billion US dollars. So we're going to subtract $2,757.2 billion from $2,259.9 billion. And so if I get my calculator over here, 2,259.9 minus 2,757.2 gives me a negative number of negative $497.3 billion. Negative $497.3 billion US dollars. What does this negative mean? Well, what would it mean if I made a negative net profit? If that would mean that I sold my cake for something that was less than the amount that I spent in buying the inputs for it. So if all the material that I needed to make my cake was, say, $18, and I sold my cake for $15, then my net gain would be negative $3. I've spent $18 and only made $15. I suffered a loss. This number here, the fact that it's negative, will tell us that we have spent more as a nation on buying stuff from other nations than we have made in selling our stuff to them. So we have bought more than we have sold. Part D asks us to consider government purchases and investment. And so that is going to be this number right here. And remember, there are a couple ways that we can add this up. Government purchases and goods and services and investment spending can be calculated by simply aligning federal and state and local spending. And so we would add federal and state and local. Or we could, if we wanted to, we could notice that federal spending is further decomposed into national defense and non-defense. So in order to get federal, we could also, if we didn't have federal, for instance, we could also add these two components to get the number for expenditure on and federal investment. And so I'm going to take that away, and I'm just going to kind of do the easiest calculation here. The easiest calculation, given what we have, is to add federal investment, 1,245.9 billion US dollars, and 1,879.6 billion US dollars, the state and local investment. So here I have 1,245.9 plus 1,879.6, which gives me 3,125.5. So 3,125.5 billion US dollars. So I'm going to put that over here. Part E asks us to calculate 2013 GDP. So remember that our formula that we went over in class. So GDP is going to be consumer spending plus investment plus government investment spending and expenditure, and it's going to be plus exports minus imports. And we've already done this calculation, and that gives us this right here. So that's our formula for GDP. GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X minus IM. Okay, and this here in parentheses is our net exports. So what I'm going to add up now is 11,000, all my calculations, 11,501.6 billion US dollars plus 2,670.1 billion dollars plus 3,125.5 billion dollars. And so let me put that in, and then I'll subtract my I will subtract my net exports number. So I have 11,501.6 minus 2,670.1. Oh, did I add? No. I subtracted. So let's start again. I have to add 11,501.6 plus 2,670.1 plus 3,125.5. And that gives me 17,297.2. So 17,297.2. Now I can't forget to subtract off my net exports. And I'm subtracting because they're negative. If they were positive, I would add it in. So I have this number minus 497.3 billion. And I have a final total of 16,799.9 billion US dollars. 16,799.9 billion US dollars. We've calculated the GDP according to our figures is 16,799.9 billion US dollars in 2013. And Part F asks us to calculate 2013 consumer spending on services as a percent of total consumer spending. So, hold on one second, let me get my pen in order here. Okay, there it is. So, what is going on? Hold on one second. Sorry. Okay. So what we are really considering here is consumer spending on services. So that's this number right here. We're considering this number here, 7,615.7, as a percent of total consumer spending. So That is this number right here, 11,501.6 billion US dollars. And so the question that we're asking is 7,615.7 billion is what percent of, well, let's not do that because I didn't put a dollar sign in the first one, of 11,501.6. And I'm going to go through this methodically in case there's any of you who don't know how to do this calculation. A really great formula that I had once learned is this one. Is over of, just follow me here, I understand this doesn't make any sense, is equal to percent over 100. And so what you want to consider is what is our is number in this problem. In this problem we say, think about the way the problem is worded, 7,615.7 is what percent of 11,501.6. The number closest to is 7,615.7. Effectively, I'm going to put that number here, okay? Of 11,501.6. So I'm going to put the of number beneath the is number, 11,501.6. So 7,615.7 is what percent of 11,501.6. So now I'm going to construct the rest of the equation. I don't know what the percent is. That is what I'm looking for. I want to know 7,615.7 is what percent of 11,501.6. The percent is what I'm looking for. So I'm actually just going to replace the percent with a variable that I'm going to solve for. I'm going to make it x, and then I have 100. Now when I solve a problem like this, what I have to do is cross multiply. And so to solve for x, so what I'm going to do is do 100 times 7,615.7, okay, over, so all I've done here is now multiplied 100 by 7,615.7 over 11,501.6 is equal to x. And if you want me to go through this any slower, you can come to my office hours. And when I do that calculation, I'm going to get the percent that that represents the percent that 7,615.7 is of 11,501.6. So I'm going to do that now on my calculator. So I will do 7,615.7 times 100, and then I'm going to divide that number by 11,501.6. What do I get? I get 66.2. That means that x in this case equals, let me just make sure I saw that correctly, 66.2%. 7,615.7 is 66.2% of 11,501.6. So the answer to part F is 66.2. What does that mean intuitively? That means, intuitively that means that if we break consumer spending up into durable goods, non-durable goods, and services, services accounts for 66.2% of all consumer spending. So most of the greatest proportion of consumer spending is spent on services. Maybe things like getting nails done or getting an oil change, or any other service. In Part G, we are asked to calculate 2013 imports as a percent of imports. And so what we are doing here is we want to know, again, this thing with my pen, I don't get it. Okay, all right. Okay, 2013 exports as a percent of imports. And so again, if you think about the numbers involved, we want to know what is, and let me do this in a different color. We want to know what is this number here as a percent of that number. And so we want to know specifically 2,259.9 billion US dollars is what percent of 2,757.2. Again, for those of you who would like me to go through it, we can set up this formula. Is over of equals a percent over 100. In this case, my is number is 2,259.9. My of number is 2,000. The number closest to the word of is 2,757.2. 2,757.2. I'm going to continue with the rest of the formula. Now, the percent is what I'm looking for, so I'm going to replace this percent sign with x over 100. To solve, I'm going to just cross multiply 100 times 2,259.9. That will leave x all by itself. And so I'm simply just going to and if I go ahead and do this calculation, where is my calculator? Must have exited out. Okay, so here's my calculator. So I'm just going to do 2,259.9 and what I get is 81.96. So I'm just going to round that off to 82%. So exports are 82% of imports. So the idea just being, let's say this is all of our imports. Well, exports, if we were going to say how much is exports as a percent of our imports, well, exports would be a big chunk, so maybe something like that. These would be our exports. And this makes sense because we are importing more than we are exporting. Remember that negative number we got for net export. So it makes sense that our exports are only 82% of our imports. Our imports are higher than our exports. Part H asks us to consider government purchases on national defense as a percentage of federal government purchases of goods and services. So what we're effectively considering here is this number here and asking what percent of federal government purchases of goods and services. So what percent is this number of this number? So what percent is 770.7 of 1,245.9? I'm going to write that out specifically. What percent? Well, you know what, let me keep writing it the way that I've been writing it. 770.7 is what percent of 1,245.9? Again, I'm going to set up this formula. Is over of equals percent over 100. And now I'm going to fill the numbers in. My is number, my number closest to the word is 770.7. My of number is 1,245.9. And just notice what's going on in this, in doing this, right? This is just saying this number, when I put this in the calculator, it's telling me how much of this number, 770.7, how big it is relative to 1,245.9. And we set up the rest of our formula. The percent here is what we don't know. And so I'm just going to replace it with an x, and then we have 100 on the bottom. And to isolate x and get it by itself, all I need to do is multiply this ratio here by 100. And so that's what I'm going to do. 100 times 770.7 over 1,245.9 will give me x. And so now I'm going to go over to my calculator. Whoops. And let's see. We have 770.7 times 100. We're going to divide it by 1,245.9. And we have 61.9% rounding. So national defense is 61.9% of federal government purchases of goods and services. So between national defense and non-defense, national defense is slightly higher as a percent of federal purchases of goods and services than is non-defense purchases.